Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are watching this video. Welcome to the Power of You, the Leaders Launch. I'm super excited to have the Leaders Launch launching today along with Rashmi Shetty. Before we talk more about the Leaders Launch, let me introduce myself. I'm Preeti Guruswamy, the founder of Lean in Women in Tech India, and also an engineering leader at In WiTI. I'm also very learning or starting my journey towards the executive coaching, and have been on that path from the past few years. With that, it's a pleasure for me to bring Rashmi Shetty today talking about the theme Break the Bias, which is one of the theme of International Women's Day. What I would like, Rashmi Shetty, what I have known her is an energetic person that I've always met her with an amazing, graceful smile that she brings the energy on. Rashmi Shetty is an international ICF credentialed professional certified coach and founder director of The Third Eye. She has taken the office from January 2022 as a trustee with ICF Foundation, a global role with International Coaching Federation, where she intends to bring being instrumental in blending important issues like climate change into the coaching. Rashmi comes from varied background of coaching, sales, storytelling, facilitator, radio jockeying, chat show, hosting, and podcasting. With all the mix of different experience, makes her a motivational speaker too. This International Women's History of the Month, we would like Rashmi would be talking us about her work with various women leaders and enabling women in the leadership position in various industries, including technology through her program, Vani. We'll be talking today with Rashmi about Break the Bias, which encounters and how she has been able to create awareness and enable many leaders. With that, I'm going to open a question to Rashmi to actually tell her a little bit more about herself, apart from the introduction that I gave her. What is that, Rashmi, that you would that a lot of people don't know about you, and you want to bring it here on the platform, and we look forward to hear from you.
Okay. What they don't know, well, that I am actually a very fun-loving person. I look very serious. But then more than that, a part of my intro, which I like to do myself, is that I'm a mother of two boys who are 26 and 23. And they teach me what communication in life is all about. So my entire learning about communication started redefining itself after I became a mother. Because at each stage, I think the child teaches you best about what it is when you communicate with people, verbally or non-verbally. And all about me, well, I have been pretty fortunate to have traveled both across India and outside. And I had a very brief stay at a place called Kazakhstan as well, where we were there for a year. I was there with my son for a year. And everywhere it was very clear to me that the moment a woman understands who she is and what she wants to give, the rest of the world understands it as well. So, about myself, postgraduate in public administration, I started off teaching, but meandered as life threw challenges at me. When I moved from Chennai, where I studied completely, to Bangalore, I realized that though I was somebody who had cleared the UGC NET exam, which qualifies me to teach without a PhD, at that point, my subject in which I had done my post graduation, which was public administration, was not available in Bangalore. So I had to find something else which I love doing. And many a times in life, there are people who come and give you the right advice at the right time. But I feel to do that, to get that, you need to put out your question or seek that answer. So when I was looking at what can I do, because I didn't want to get into political science, which was the subject that was available here, I started talking to people and saying, I want to do something different. What do I do? And they said, what do you like doing? And I said, I like talking to people. And that's where they said, okay, why don't you apply in the five-star hotels into customer relations executive? I never thought I'll make it, but I applied and I just sent letters, and all the private organizations, private hotels at that time, there were about 4 or 5, sent me interview calls and I got selected. My mother was very strict because she said night duty is not for an unmarried girl in a hotel industry and you're not going to do it. So the only hotel that sent a huge, like the return for my letter was a 10-page application was Ashok Hotel. And at that time, Ashok was part of ITDC. So it was the government hotel. And the 10-page application was all details about me. And I really liked the way it was formatted. I applied, I got called for the interview. When I went in there, it was an interview call for sales. And in the room were 90 boys and 10 girls. And when I entered the space, I was like, I am going to get this job. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to get this job because I didn't have any clue what they're going to ask. I knew my communication was good, but I had no clue about sales. And when we moved on, as the different rounds happened, I realized one thing, that it's all about how you are comfortable with yourself and how you present yourself. So the filtration happened with the GD, an impromptu speech, and finally about 25 of us were selected, 3 girls and the remaining 22 were boys. And when the final round, the result was out, it was just 1 girl and 2 boys. It was such a fulfilling moment for me because it was so clear that if you start working on your communication, life throws opportunities which you can't even think of. And that's where my journey began. This is one part that not many people know about me, because from there, I learned how to think on my feet. Sales is the best place to start if you want to polish your communication. And it makes you think on your feet. And, you know, Ashok is situated, if you're from Bangalore, you know, it's in a space where people have to cross the Taj, the entire Taj group of hotels, Windsor Manor and Oberoi, and then come to Ashok. And the area that was given to me to sell our services was MG Road, where all these hotels were close by. But I did manage to crack. And I got a few clients into Ashok as long as I was there. And one thing at that point I understood is how much you believe in what you're speaking. Because when I remember I went into a client's office and he was like, Madam, I am completely with Taj because if there is any problem, any technical problem, the mic or projector, we have West End or Gateway that will give us the supplement. But Ashok is a government hotel and there are unions. Where will you go if anything doesn't work? And I remember still the confidence with which I said, try us once, sir. You won't even have a problem with any equipment that we'll have to think of alternatives. He was so taken aback that he remained a client with Ashok till I was with Ashok. And that was my first lesson, to understand that in communication, whatever you say, it's not what you say, but how you say it that sends the message across to the person and tells them how much you believe in whatever you're doing, whether you're selling a product or a service. That's how my journey began, Preeti. And then on now, looking back, everything I did had one dot, very prominent dot, and that was communication. Whether I moved into head a project as a project director, then moved on to be a book advisor with the Time Warner Group, then went on to become a storyteller with children. And from there, one of the parents who saw me and the way I was telling the story, she introduced me to the Wipro group. And I ended up being empaneled by Wipro. And then it's easy to sell you because Wipro has certain standards as far as training goes. And from there, again, when I went there, I had no clue how to design a program. I had no clue what it is you give as outcomes and deliverables when you're talking training program. When the HR head asked me, okay, what are you going to talk about, Rashmi? I was doing storytelling for children. So I said, efficacy of storytelling. He said, okay, shoot, 10 minutes. And I told 7 stories on how stories are most powerful in giving out a message. And the moment I finished, he said, will you be telling stories to my kids when they come in for training? I said, yeah. So he said, you're in. And then on the job, I learned. So one of again, one of the biggest takeaways there for me was an opportunity comes to you only because you're ready, even if you're aware of it or not. So don't let go of anything life throws at you. So, yeah, from there began the facilitation bit. And then I moved on into coaching. And coaching happened again, a conversation that led to coaching, and the entire thing just fell in place. But parallelly, what opened for me was this voice industry. A random ad in the paper which said, if you think you have a good voice, join. And I was a mother at that time. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know whether I had a good voice, but I still went for the workshop because they had some amazing resource people in that workshop. And the person who organized it at the end of the 2-day workshop, when I went to the workshop, I was already 34 and I was the oldest in that workshop. Everyone else, we call it students, or maybe just joined work types. And so I had no hesitation in asking any question. And therefore, I got noticed. And it was a group of at least 100, 150 people who were there in the workshop. But because I asked the maximum number of questions, I got noticed. And the person who organized it, he told me, you have a very good voice. I think you should try for radio. And I went to All India Radio because that's the radio station he directed me to. They said, Madam, 35 is the cutoff and you'll be reaching 35 in the next 6 months. So this is your only chance. If you don't make it now, you can never apply again. And so I applied. Again, a reaffirmation of the learning. Opportunity comes when you're ready. Just go there and do your bit. The rest happens. So that's all about myself. So still learning, Preeti, and life has been an amazing teacher. So completely grateful for the way life turned out.
Amazing, Rashmi. I mean, it was very, I mean, at every step, you have like broken so many biases, right? Biases that you had for self, biases that the society had for you, the biases that came from the family, or, applying for something that you didn't know itself is something that you need to break and go in. What caught my attention was, while you're identifying, you were privileged enough to get good advices from the people, but very well said that you need to put yourself there to get it. And I think as women we hesitate to put ourselves there, right? We stop ourselves to put ourselves there. That and opportunities, right? I mean, opportunities are there, but you only get opportunity when you're ready. And what I derive from that is ready with not your technical skill, ready with your mental ability or the mental wellness that I can do it versus can I do it, right? I think it was amazing to see the shifts of the journey that you have brought in. And today, as a coach, you're coaching so many leaders. And I'm sure there are quite a lot of such biases that you're seeing, self-doubt, which comes in a lot with women, and many other part of it, right? While you broke all these biases for yourself and you stood out there, and as you very rightly said, life is a good teacher for all of us, and we don't have to seek anywhere, right? And we can always be our student and make yourself visible. Very well said that, Rashmi. With that, I think I want to segue to a little bit, shifting a bit of a gears on what the in terms of the biases that you've broken, as I said, with ecosystem, with the family, with yourself, and being a mom, should I apply to a radio jockey or no? And being there with the diverse set where you feel you're not belonging to the group, right? Age is another one. You always feel. What is important in all of these, Rashmi? What will enable any person to break these biases at different levels?
Like you said, Preeti, I think the first bias and the most important bias to break is the bias of the self. Okay? Whatever the world feeds you, whatever the conditioning is, we always have a choice of breaking that. And the self conditioning is where the journey begins. Now, even if I take it from my own story, every time life threw an obstacle saying, okay, now you cannot do this. Your husband is moving out of town, so you have to look for something else. Leave this and go because you want to have the best of both of you with your children as they're growing up. And every time I let go of it, I had no clue what's in store. But the beauty of understanding that breaking of the self bias first is you are willing to risk and go and meet people, okay, whether you know them or not. So it starts first with complete self acceptance. If you are not comfortable with yourself, nobody will be comfortable. So, understanding who you are, how you are, what is it that you think you need to improve, and what are those areas that make you completely comfortable, whatever happens around you, are those self awareness moments that you need to constantly keep putting your finger on and reflecting on. Okay. And the moment you start doing that, the first and most important bias, because self doubt continues, that imposter syndrome will continue even today. You know, there are certain moments when you're like, okay, can I do this? Do you think I can say the whole page without looking at it? Those questions do come in, they come in. But the idea is not to allow them to dominate your confidence, but to allow them to come in, chatter, and then move away. Because unless it's out, it doesn't go away. It remains at the back of your mind. So get it out, allow it to come and say, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then move. Because see, every time you get onto anything, there is a script, mental script or a written one. And nobody knows that script other than you. So even if you goof up that script, only you know you goofed up the original script. But if you have that complete confidence to face the person and say, this is my script and this is who I am, then they don't find out at all. Because every member in the audience sitting there, whether you're doing a show or talking one on one, is not hoping you goof up and make a fool of yourself. They also have come there to have a good time, good conversation. So therefore, it's very simple. If you goof up, just smile to yourself. If they have found out, just say, I'm sorry. Just go ahead and say it. So to break the bias, first start with yourself. And then when you are in different moments of your life, you know, like I remember when I had my children, this was again one of my mentors in Ashok Hotel. She was the executive manager and executive general manager, and I was reporting to her. And the moment she knew I was engaged, I was going to be married, she took me aside and she said, Rashmi, this is an advice from a mentor to another woman. Okay. I'm telling you this because today I have a 17-year-old son. If life gives you an opportunity, your husband's earning a decent salary, the woman has control about finances once you get married and you're getting kids into the family. So very economically lead your life, but make sure you're there in the first formative years of your children. I'm giving it from a space where I did not do it. Today, I've reached the top of my ladder, and my son is busy in college. I have the time. I have my lap, but he's too big for it. So if you have a choice, then wisely stay away from work, take a break, be with your kids when they need you most. And then you anyway have to have confidence to get back into the workforce. You will fit yourself somewhere, but it's that belief that you have to understand why you're taking the break. If you are convinced you need that break and can handle yourself, just do it. Because children come in by choice, and give them everything you can in those first formative years. That for me was advice on a rock. Nothing changed it. And once my kids came in, I worked till my first one, till I was carrying him for about 8 months. Once he came into the world and my next one came in, I consciously stayed away from work. Yes, we did a lot of cutting, budgeting, and but then it was well worth it because those years never come back, and you children just grow overnight. When my second one was around 14 months, I realized I was talking to a neighbor in English and I didn't know a basic word that needed to come. I was just blank up here because we speak Tulu at home. And I was very clear that my children should know Tulu before they speak English. So, therefore, I had completely lost touch with English. And I was talking to this friend and it was a very simple word and I'm like, what's happening? Communication was your asset and you can't speak a simple sentence. And then I started looking for something where I could do it with my children with me, not leaving them under daycare or something like that. And the problem with many women is they think such things are not available. They don't look for options. The moment you close the door is closed. And I didn't want to do that. I was seeking something where I could take my children to work. And that's where the Time Warner Group opportunity came in. It was again selling. It was a whole set of books that I invested in, and I needed to sell 10 times those books if I wanted to get a return on my investment. The books were amazing, but very expensive. And I wanted the books. And I remember at that time when I told my husband, you know what, we'll invest in this and I'll get it back. He's like, how? I said, no, I'll have to go do meet parents and do presentations. He was like, what? These children are so small. It's okay. You don't have to worry about all that. You don't have to leave them and go. I said, no, I'm not going to leave them and go. You're going to be there on the weekend. I'm going to go at the weekends. And he said, you think you want to do it? I think you shouldn't. I said, no, I want to. Because I wanted to first make him understand that that investment is returnable and I'm going to return it. Okay. So it was a test for me, not for him. And I remember he would look for excuses not to stay back on Sunday because he thought this lady's not going to bring it back. So why even waste my Sunday? And once he noticed the first check that came in as commission, he changed his entire schedule. So weekends he would be there at home. I would just cook a dish, he would make the rice. He started understanding how to play roles in the kitchen, which he never came to. So that was the second most important bias. That when the people with you start believing and you break it for them by proving that it's possible, it gives you a different kind of strength from within. And I think that is the next one that happened. And the third bias is the world prescribes rules. The world says that this is what you have to do at this age, this is what you have to do at this age, and this is what you will be doing at this age. Age is just a number. You choose how you present yourself and what your presence means to you before it means anything to the world. So breaking those biases again, you know, when you, like so many women say this, when they are sitting in a room on a table, a round table with meetings, one of the leaders I coach, she was saying how the moment she enters the space and they're sharing a table like this, the guy would sit with his back facing her. And she would, whatever she says, he doesn't even heed to a word of what she says. Physically, he's so strongly biased against a woman sharing his table. The problem many a time is men don't even realize that. Because the conditioning has happened at home. They've had everything their way, while women had to kind of speak their way through to be what they want to be. So certain times, so I asked her, have you ever told him this? She said no. But it's just so evident. The moment I step in, he sits with his back facing me. I said, the next time you have a meeting, just tell him that listen, I am not comfortable. So can you please sit straight because I feel I'm not heard. She said, okay, because you're telling me this, I will go and use this the next time. And when she told him, he reacted exactly to her surprise, but my expectation as in, oh, really? I never even knew this. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And he, after that, consciously would make sure that the moment she comes, he'll stand up and then sit down. So that way he doesn't show her his back. So sometimes it's not that they are aware of it and do it consciously, it's just an unconscious habit. So maybe just communicating that and clarifying it makes a big difference, makes a very big difference. So breaking the bias happens at every stage, at every level. But the first most important bias is the bias for the self. And the moment we break that and stop believing here that, okay, once you're a mother, once you give up your career, there's no way you can get back. Once you become a mother, everything comes to a standstill. And getting back to the workforce, there is so many options today. And you can still be part of it and contribute big time if you believe in who you are. So that for me has been breaking the bias at different levels.
Wonderful, Rashmi. I think as you rightly said, I think the ecosystem is providing a lot of work opportunity for women, and it is definitely a golden era for bringing in equality and equity across all levels. Though this, it would still take a long time for us to reach there where we want to reach. But I really want to bring up the aspect of, taking a break in your career without a guilt,
Yeah.
right? A lot of women take a break because and sometimes they take a break thinking that's the way that it needs to do, versus it being their choice, or even if it is their choice, not able to identify that they're a choice, and get into the trap of having a guilt that I'm not working. And I like the way you identified yourself there and said, I want to do it. And it's not breaking the bias for yourself, but also, enabling your path towards on what you want to do, what you wish to do. And I think that the advice that, I very resonate with that advice. I personally also feel that, we have in charge of our career as we are in charge of our life, we are also in charge of our career. We definitely can own a career. And break can be that beautiful moment where you can upskill yourself. And I always say this, and I want to put that as, most of the time people who are working may not be as upskilled as people who are not working or who are on break because, the lack of time, right? And the industry requires you to be continuous learner. And in every point, you made a very important part of communication, right? You need to, first of all, you need to be available to communicate and use that as the medium and the tool, uh, not only to grow yourself, breaking the bias and growing yourself across everything. Very, very well said about, how it's important for us to identify that at every step and, break it. Given that, while we are all driving this change for bringing equality and equity, and especially gender being the important part of it because of the leaky pipeline. And I think it's been years that we have been speaking, more than a decade, about the leaky pipeline, and the pipeline is still leaking. Right, and it is a challenge across everywhere, right, to build this strong pipeline. It's just in technology space, non-technology space, in any space for that matter, right? What do you think is the powerful opportunity that will help to drive this change?
The powerful opportunity, you mean what life throws at us, or generally what we choose? How do you want me to think?
Want to talk about powerful, not at just at the individual space, but mostly in the space of the complete ecosystem. What could be the powerful opportunity for this ecosystem?
Yeah.
To drive this change of breaking the bias and bringing equality and equity up to the par, which we are saying it takes 99 years from now.
Yeah, I think this is a very beautiful question because both men and women play a role here. Okay. I've been fortunate that I had a boss like that so early in my career who gave me the right advice and who really was somebody who was holding my back in when I set out in a journey as in sales. When I set out teaching, which is how I began my career in Chennai, my HOD was completely behind. So I have met some amazing women mentors. careers. And I feel that in the beginning of careers for women, women empowering women is one of the most powerful phrases that I've come across. Because you're comfortable with a woman sharing a lot of what you're going through, because one is physically also, a woman understands a woman far better. And it really helps when you find mentors amongst women. And therefore, I feel if women who are in the seniority levels become those mentors to those women who are stepping out on their journey, because they've seen more of life and experience than these young girls have, that'll be a huge space for actually breaking the first bias. Many women don't like working with women bosses because they feel the women bosses are extra harsh to the women in comparison to the men, in order not to be seen as biased towards the same gender. It's ironic, but it is true. So I think the moment you stop worrying about that validation outside when you reach a level of seniority, but notice that both men and women have capability. And if you take that care to make sure that if you notice a woman employee is good, but she's only lacking a little bit of confidence because of self doubt, take her under your wing. And that'll really help. And to the men, the leaders in that space, what I would love to tell them is, because I've met some amazing people who, the moment they notice you can handle it, just let go. So whether it was in the radio industry, where in a space like All India Radio, there are a lot of men around you, technically, engineers in the control room, so many different spaces in the duty room. But the moment they realize that you are somebody who is sincere in what you're doing and you're doing your work and you're very clear about how much you're going to do, they are able to see the lines very clear. So I think as women, if we draw our lines very clear, our boundaries very clearly, make it clear how much we can give and what more we can do, I think both ways, whether men or women, they will become great mentors. So the next thing, especially when it comes, I love the theme this year of Break the Bias, because many of us are even unconscious of the biases that we carry. Like I remember when my mother was sick and we had some friends come over. I wasn't at home, I'd gone out for something. My son came and offered them juice or something that was there. He made it and he came and offered. And the lady who had come to meet my mother is herself a mother of two boys. And when I walked in, she says, "Oh, you trained your son very well." I said, "For what?" So she was like, "No, he made juice and all that and came and gave it to us." I said, "Isn't that the easiest thing to do?" So she was like, "No, no, but still you did it." So I think that conditioning that women carry, that boys needn't do it, and it's only the girl in the family. What happens when you don't have girls at home? The boys need to be equipped to do it. And today, I think cooking is one of the biggest stress busters. And go and check every hotel world over. Most of the executive chefs are men. And I remember when I asked my executive chef in Ashok, he said, "Rashmi, you should come home for coffee." I said, "Are you going to make the coffee?" He said, "No, no, you've had my coffee here. At home, it's my wife." I was like, "How come?" He's like, "No, this is my job, no? And she has pleasure doing it. So you can have her coffee." So when executive chefs world over mostly are men, why is it such a bias that the kitchen is not the space for men? But it's so nice to hear when today a lot of them are experimenting in the kitchen. Okay, so there are a lot of these things which we have to break in our conditioning at home. And when it happens at home, it starts showing in society, which is the next layer. And then from society to the workspace, which is again part of the society. So I feel if both men and women drop this difference between men and women, because what life was a few years ago with women at home as nurturers and men as a primary caregivers being the ones who are bringing in the money home, it has now continued to be the same, though women are also going out and bringing in money into the house, while the other part of the duty still remains the same with women. So if men step in there I think the difference can be seen everywhere. Because after that, at home, if the conditioning is this way, it becomes far more easier for society also to take it. Because the moment men understand that women, all they need is a little bit of push. Because this is one more thing, Preeti, I noticed in the pandemic during meetings and all that, women would never talk. Okay. And when I meet them one on one and I ask, you have such a brilliant idea, why didn't you say it in the room? They would be like, nobody asked. Okay. So maybe initially, if it's a new team, there are a few women, ask them. And maybe that way you can make them comfortable, whether the leader is a man or a woman. Because this is an answer which one of the senior leaders gave me, that after a certain level in leadership, if you notice, their language is exactly the same. The feminine power of being a nurturer comes out in a leader. So then it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. So you're just a nurturer at that point. That becomes higher. And the pandemic has been our biggest teacher. Most of the teams found out how vulnerable and real their leaders are. And leaders realized it needed to bring out that vulnerability and authenticity and genuine care for the team to be better bonded when things moved virtual. So I think, in a way, the pandemic has been our teacher in breaking the bias to a big extent of masculine versus feminine energies, because we are made up of both, every one of us. And coming back to nature itself, all the 5 elements plus masculine and feminine is a choice that we have to show when it comes to emotions. So women empowering women is something that I would advocate big time, especially for those women who are stepping in, and from those women who have already been there and understood. And men stepping in as mentors and not seeing the women as, okay, she can do only this much. Like, this is again a common thing that it's not out of bias that a woman cannot do. But one of the women I was coaching was saying how she had just had a baby, and the baby was about 6 months when she returned to work. And she was very good at her work, and her work required a lot of travel. So when she returned to work, the boss, after a month, announced in the meeting saying that, okay, let's call her Sheila. Sheila will not travel because she has a baby now. So Ashok, will you take up that? And Sheila was so hurt because she had her support system in place and was willing to travel. But the moment, and she was so disappointed when she came into the call. So I said, have you expressed it to him? She said, no. I said, why don't you tell him? Maybe he doesn't know. He must have done it just out of concern. So when she did that, and he was like, oh, really? I didn't know this. Okay, fine. Then Ashok doesn't have to do it. You can do it. So sometimes it's all about, it's their concern. It's not their bias. Because their conditioning is, when the baby is small, the mother is comfortable with the baby is comfortable with the mother is not maybe in a position to travel. But if you make it clear that you have a support system and everything in place, so I'm willing to travel, and you make it clear, I think that's where clarity in communication plays a big. So you call it bias that way, but maybe it's just a communication gap. And the more we start looking at it that way, change our perceptions, I think we'll find only allies around us and nobody there waiting to put us down. So, like I said, it starts from us.
Very well said. A lot of things that actually starts from us, and clarifying that it'll help us, because I think a lot of the things are wired, be it men or women, right? And especially like the way you said, when your boy got the juice, made the juice and got for the juice, is a kind of surprising event. Well, but let's say if your daughter had done the same thing, it wouldn't have been an event, right? It would have been a natural stuff. And while you said, and I'm a strong believer about women empowering women. I mean, that's why we are here, and building this community was the intent about women communities like Lean in Women in Tech India, to basically empower women to other women as well. But I'm going to challenge a twist here. I'm going to place 2 challenges for you at this point of time. And as this challenge came as you speak. Well, you said yes, when women reaches the leadership, can mentor a woman in the space, and we all know, Rashmi, and even during your talk from the last 25 minutes, we've all been speaking about how you were placed alone in the room, be it in the radio jockey room, be it the women leaders that, or the leaders that you have spoken to, or have brought in the different challenges they have spoken about being wired about, or all of them being alone in the room, right? And there is a scarcity for women mentors, right? As in young women out of the campus and entering the workforce, probably she might still find women in her mid-layer per se. But then the next transition is when the woman moves into mid-layer, and then there's white, right? How would how how can that woman face this challenge about finding a mentor for herself? That's one question. And the second one about wiring, one is very well said. I think a lot of us, I think most of the time, are held up with unconscious bias, but there is also conscious bias that's there in the wired case. Just to talk about the case that you brought in, right, on travel, where Sheila couldn't travel because her manager assumed. There are many cases when a woman went back, they still didn't get an opportunity, right? So that's the conscious bias. So what's your take on both of these? I know this is the challenging question for you based on what you.
Okay, being the lone woman in the room, uh, never, I never saw myself as alone in the room, for one. Okay, because I knew what I had as my assets. And wherever, there were so many meetings. Like you said, women are in a big force when it comes to entry level. Mid level is by when they're all settled, and the next level is where the number of women start dwindling. And the ones who stay on are very less in comparison to the ones who leave. And leave because of different reasons. Even the lack of support system is one of the reasons. So some of them, maybe, like, I was fortunate to do it out of choice, but not everybody gets that choice. So you're right. You're right. But being the lone woman in the room need not be the reason why you need to take all the attention or seek attention. Okay? It's how equipped you are with what is required for the discussion. So that's why upskilling yourself parallelly with whatever you're doing, being an interesting conversationalist, knowing a little about everything really helps. And this is not only for women, this is for anybody in the room. Okay? The more interesting you are as a person, and the more knowledgeable, as in, you don't have to give your opinions on everything, but just contribute something when conversations are beyond work also makes you interesting. So start building that skill so that they don't see you as a woman, but just another person in the room. And maybe it's because I was an RJ. It helped me in that room. Most of the meetings happened with very few women when you are in the station. And at that time, it helps when you can contribute in ideas, in frameworkings of how you need to build certain things, on ideas of creativity. Because I think women are wired to be far more creative, much more. Okay, while men are very rational and logical, women can go beyond the boundary. And I feel that's where many of the women that I worked with stood out because of their creativity. Okay, so understand what you're good at, hone those skills beyond what is expected for that workspace. And then you will no more be the lone woman. You'll just be one other in the room. Okay, this is something, and all this comes with the levels of confidence with which you speak. You need to be very self assured. If you're constantly seeing yourself as judged, you're only going to seek validation. The more confident you are, okay, fine. If they're not going to accept it, it's fine. So you don't have to feel that they're rejecting you. They just rejected your idea. So the moment you drop all this, when you're sitting at the table, you're an equal. If you've been called for a meeting, it's because your inputs are valuable. You put your input. Take it or leave it is their choice. But don't sit quietly and wait for them to ask you. Just put in whenever you feel is the right time to put it, because you've been called for the reason that you can contribute. Contribute. That's very important. And secondly, don't look at yourself as a different gender. You are there to contribute, contribute. Don't take any rejection as personal. Very important. They're rejecting the idea. Step back. You've given your idea, then step back. So that ability to differentiate the two is very important. And the next thing about moving to after a certain level and not having that many women around you to mentor is where your understanding of allyship comes in. Because I feel that there are a lot of men out there willing to be an ally. Drop your bias. Try and understand what is it that they're trying to tell you. Maybe the way they speak is something that they're not aware of. But always clarify conversations to get it clear on both sides that this is what you're taking back and therefore that's what he also should take back. You should be very clear about who you are and why you are seeking that mentorship, and draw your lines very clear. Be very clear where it should stop. Beyond 8:30, I will not take office calls. However urgent, you can message me. I'll send you a mail, but I cannot take office calls at home beyond 8:30 or 9 or whatever is your working time, and how you decide this. I think that lines are drawn by us women. So that's where the lines are clear for the other side also, whoever your mentor is, that whether man or woman, that, okay, fine. Beyond this time, maybe she has her personal life. All of us have a choice, right? The great resignation happened in the pandemic only because people suddenly realized they don't have to be on call 24/7. It's your life, and it can just go in a jiffy like that. So you might as well take control before it's gone. So I think if you're clear about all this, Preeti, that clarity comes in only when you're self-assured. The fear, most of our decisions are out of fear. And the moment we drop fear, we exist with a lot more assurance. So I think that can help handle all the situations, both the challenges that you put forth to me. I hope you got the answer that you set out to find.
Yes. And how, why we know we're breaking unconscious bias, and it's also the willingness to break the bias, the conscious and unconscious bias that we have. But we are also aware that we do have people in the ecosystem where very hardwired and do not. And sometimes they do sit, not sometimes, most of the time, I'm correcting myself, most of the time they sit in the power, right? And what is the message that you would give for the people in the power, right? How could they break their conscious bias? I think we've spoken a lot about unconscious bias, but how do they break their conscious bias? Because they are the important enablers to bring in the equality.
Yeah, agree with you completely. And for that, they need to be spoken to. Okay, they need to be told about it. For some people, it's very tough. Like I remember a friend sharing how when he had gone in for a coaching assignment, there was a most difficult person, a senior leader in a company who needed to be coached. Okay, and the problem was the senior leader was somebody anybody could talk to, and he was very friendly. But in the last 2 or 3 years, he's been very difficult to deal with. And people who enjoyed working with him did not want to work with him. And so this friend of mine was asked to go there for coaching, and she was a lady. So the first time when she went in for the coaching conversation, she could see from his body language that he was not comfortable being coached by a woman. Okay. And then after the first few conversations, exchanges, he knew that the company wanted him to be coached by her. So he knew he didn't have a choice. If he wanted to stay on the job, he needed to be coached by her. So finally, she opened up, helped him create that safe space, saying, our conversations are only here, they're not outside. So don't worry, just share whatever you want to. And I'm here only to help you understand what is troubling you. That's all. And that's when he broke down. And his story was so different from what the company expected. It is so challenging for people, and he was a man, when he realized that he comes from a very remote village in Rajasthan where girls are married off by the time they're 17, they are mothers. And he had a daughter who at 24 was setting up a architecture business of her own. And he was seen as one of the few people who left the village to become so successful in the world outside. And when he went back home, he goes every year for their school and college, whatever functions and all that, because he's a chief guest always. He noticed that off late when he's been going, there are murmurs in the room, in the kitchen when he enters. And the moment he steps in, it all becomes quiet. So when he asked one of the women the women don't even come out, they stay in the kitchen. So he's like, okay, what happened? What are you all talking about? So they said, no, you come here as a successful person and everybody is looking at you. Yes, but according to us, you're one of the most unsuccessful human beings we have seen. Why? Because as a father, you have failed in your duty. Your daughter is 24, 25. She's still not married. Well, at 17 years, we have mothers. The moment he heard that, he was very disturbed. And he didn't say anything to them. But when he was like, am I that unsuccessful because my daughter is not married? When he came here and he noticed his daughter so happy in the space she's operating from, he realized that the bias is his, that is irritating him. And the frustration, when he was sharing this with her, he started understanding that that frustration which he could not show with his daughter, he was showing at the workplace. And for him, that is when it started becoming very clear. So he was a very hardwired person. But sometimes going and speaking it out to a very objective person like a coach can really make a difference. So coaching there can really help. If you find somebody hardwired, maybe a coaching conversation or getting into a coaching agreement with some coach who can help them understand what it is can make a big difference. Yes. Otherwise, having a straightforward conversation. Sometimes they're not willing to listen. So you can't do anything else, right? You can only communicate. So hardwired people need to have a sounding board and need to be told, because sometimes, like I said, many of these emotions need to be expressed. We cannot assume they'll understand, because men are wired differently, women are wired. And the moment we understand that wiring itself is where the mistake is, where the difference is, I think it becomes easy for us to communicate. So get it clearly out. Converse, speak, speak, speak. If a wiring has to be understood, you have to get it out of your system. At least tell the person that this is something that I noticed. Can I please share this with you? Because this is something that I've noticed and got as a feedback, okay, for the hardwired people. And then see if they're willing to have a coaching journey. Because I think when they know and get it out, the moment he recognized what it was, it made a huge difference in his leadership skills. And it made it easy for the team to breathe. And that is very important, that breathing space.
You are actually sending very strong messages for the organizations as well as the ecosystem, right? As a women, we need to speak up and, have to bring this to the notice, right? That's where our responsibility lies with us, and not getting attached to the results about it. And for people who are wired, it is important that has to be told, whether it's a hard way or whether it's any part of the way, right? And it's an important message for the organization to take that step to do it. And in the case that you brought in, it is the organization that took that step who brought in that to that person, and challenging him further to give a woman as a coach.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think sometimes it's hard message, But I think it is the responsibility, as you are mentioning, about the organization, the ecosystem, to take that while hearing the voice of a woman, not, letting the women's voice go away, but hear to their voice. Because when they say something, they do say very powerful.
Yeah.
Right. Respecting that for the well-being of the organization and all the employees. It's just not women, right? Both men and women. Very well said that, some messages has to be heard and some messages have to be, and yeah, and sometimes acceptance and let go can play a very, very critical role. With that, Rashmi, I think we've almost come to our end of the session, and I want to talk about the most important part of you being the enabler in this ecosystem through your program called Vani. Right? Can you tell a little bit more about it, on how you have been the enabler here, empowering, or being an empowered woman, empowering a woman?
When it comes to Vani, Vani was a program that was born out of the pandemic. I was looking for an Indian name because I thought a lot of English names are there and we call different programs different things. So I was looking for something Indian, and that's when I came up with this acronym Vani, which is Virtual Articulation Narrating Instrument, which is your voice. Virtually, when you articulate or you narrate, the instrument you use is your voice. And having had about almost 2 decades of experience as an RJ, voiceover artist, MC, and doing so many different assignments with voice primarily, I realized that in the virtual medium, most of them keep their cameras off. And therefore, you need to have something to keep the people on with you. Okay. And I realized how important the voice is. The voice is one at the physical level, which is the voice. And then we have different layers of leadership also, which can be translated in the voice. So that's where this program was conceived. And I offered it to women because I noticed women hesitate so much to invest on themselves. It is the family's budget, every other person's budget, their extended family's budget, and then they come in, if at all they come in. While when you offer anything to men and you suggest during coaching conversations that you need to do this and that, they're most willing to just close their eyes and invest. But women take a long time. So I thought, okay, let me offer something for women, which is completely about understanding where she's coming from. So our voice, if you go just by the mentoring portion of it, literally with the voice, breath plays a very important role. So, how to learn the breathing and different elements of breathing. And then how each voice has its own levels of drama. So, how do you modulate your voice? Because here the framework of Vani is around building your vocabulary, working around the articulation, and then being very conscious of the nonverbal cues that you're giving in. And I stands for inflection. So it is vocabulary, articulation, nonverbal cues, and inflection or the throw of the voice. So, how do you handle all of this technically? Because I come from that technical background, and then move it to the leadership space of voice. Okay. So, here there are elements of voice that we take in as volume, oscillation, inflection, clarity, and the emotional elements. But at the leadership level, and that has gone up as a podcast on the ICF podcast page as well. I made a podcast of this, which talks about voice that we can use as a coaching tool with leaders, as in the vulnerability with which the coach comes into a coaching conversation, the objectivity with which you listen to whatever is happening non judgmentally. The I stands for being informed, understanding what all you need to know before you get into the conversation about the background. Then C stands for compassion. Compassion is empathy plus action, how to take empathy to the next level. And E stands again here in this case for how to hold yourself together to keep the conversation engaged. Okay, so it is each of these levels of voice that I play with and work with. And I noticed that a lot of women who came in with a lot of self-doubt, going back that much more empowered. So it is one of the most satisfying pieces of the pandemic for me. That when I put it out, I was not even sure who is going to take it. But I was so happy that so many women I did not know went ahead and took this and have seen the difference. So that is why Vani for me is a baby that I nurture very closely to my heart. And for a woman, I feel the moment you find your voice, you found yourself.
Very well said. I mean, it's very important for all of us to find the voice and, and then speak the mind, right? And I think the moment you find your voice, you find your confidence that is there in you. That's the power of you that emerges out of you to be the better version of yourself. That's wonderful, Rashmi. And I think before we go, I would like you to share one message for all the leaders, while you have enabled a lot of leaders in this and throughout your journey. What is that one message that you would like to deliver?
Well, all I want to say is whatever you're seeking outside you is within. So start from yourself, and that journey from the self is where you will start seeing what a beautiful journey life is. So just be grateful, go inward for whatever you have, understand who you can be, who you want to be, and you are equipped completely. You are whole and complete as you are. So start with that confidence. The rest of the way will just appear. Like Rumi says, you start walking and the way appears.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation we had today. And there was so many takeaways that we could go in. But I think one thing that I would like to leave the audience, especially the women, is to find your voice, right? And rise up to your confidence that is there. The power is within you. So find that voice to find the power in you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Preeti. Beautifully said. And thanks so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.